Hello, everybody, and welcome today to PISA Presents with When Whales Were Still, mind you, Walking. Fossil whales and their evolution. So let's have a look into the origins of our cetacean friends. Now, this right here is the fossilized skeleton of an early whale, and found in Egypt nonetheless. Now, how whales got from there to the aquatic marvels of today is a story that spans over 50 million years. Well, actually, a bit longer, just to explain a key point. Oh, there he goes. Now, right here you have Pangaea. Pangaea, of course, existed from about 335 to ballpark 200 million years ago. Now, as these continental plates that formed it began shifting apart in the Mesozoic, those various land masses were treated to a rather huge change in the layout of oceans, resulting in what is called the Tethys Ocean. Now, here you can get a slightly better look at it from up top to down on bottom when things started widening, and the Tethys is the result of just that, a bit of widening. So it's a body of water between the Africa of Pangaea and its northern neighbors that resulted in basically the breakup of the continent. And as these continents started breaking apart, these individual plates rather, this body of water that became known as the Tethys Ocean started to develop. Now, of course, as the continents kept moving throughout time, the borders of this ocean changed as well. And further continental shenanigans, well, they just kept making things change and shift even more. So it lasted in various forms until about 5 million years ago or so, resulting in several parts of northern Africa and into the Middle East, lands that in the time of Tethys were underwater, becoming loaded with aquatic fossils today. So these places that we'll be mentioning pretty soon that a lot of these creatures were found in, you may not typically think of them as sites for aquatic fossils, but at the time that they were alive, well, the particular country was indeed underwater. Now, here's this. So, DNA testing show that today's whales are closest related to what are called artiodactyls. Now, these are mammals that walk or bear weight, is another term you may see often, on an even number of their 5 toes, with the rest ranging from just like general lesser importance, I don't really use you as much, to being pretty much vestigial. And yes, I said toes. While I realize that one doesn't think of whales as having their toes, their closest living relative certainly does, which is this right here, the hippo. Indeed, whales are most closely related, they've done a whole butt ton of DNA testing, to the hippopotamus. Now, obviously, they don't really look that much alike. Now, quite a few million years of evolution and a whole lot of divergence will do that for you, but still, the story of whale evolution is actually remarkably short. A scant 20 million years, roughly, was all that it took to transform cat-sized land dwellers, with hooves, mind you, into the animals we know and love today. So let us look at some of these fossils right here. And keep in mind during this process that this does not mean that species A evolved into species B and likewise and likewise and likewise. On the contrary, as per pretty much every other creature that we've discussed here in this channel, paleontologists do not really know exactly the hows and the whens and the why of how cetaceans evolved. They just know that there were various early species. Whether or not one species evolved from another or into another is still something that is very much highly debated. Now, for years, paleontologists sought the fossils of a species that would be somewhat between the artiodactyls and modern cetaceans, just to kind of, explain a lot of that. Now, that changed in India in 2007 when they discovered Indohyus. Yes, this is an early form of a whale. Now, its name being a slightly unconventional, for lack of a better word choice, being that it means pig of India. Indohyus was a hoofed carnivore that lived from about 50 million years ago to 48 or 47 and was the size of a fox or a large cat. but its size isn't what makes it unique. Firstly, it had very dense leg bones, and how does that come in handy? Well, it weights you down underwater. Within these bones was a little concoction called an astragalus. Gosh darn stammer almost came out there, sorry. Now, that's a pulley like bone in the ankle that's only found in artiodactyls. Now, this right here is an entirely other structure that's very, very important as well. The skull on the left is Endohyus, and the skull on the right, for comparison, is, for whatever reason, a raccoon. Now, I just put that picture there because I find it absolutely freaking adorable when you see raccoons washing their little hands and they look like kind of like scoops. It's very cute. So, Indohyus also had a specialized thick ear bone called the involucrum that previously was only found in whales. So, of course, when scientists found this, it's circled by that white box that's right there. They were just, this is a puzzler. Now, it's very, very an obviously hard structure right there, and that's for good reason. It's difficult for many creatures to hear underwater for, you know, obvious reasons. But Indohyus and modern whales needed to do it. Indohyus actually was partially aquatic. We know that from the various things like, say, the shape of its snout and how it most likely ate things like fish, and also to the regions where its fossils were found. Now, how something like this structure would help is that if your head is below water for any amount of time, that can put a great deal of pressure on your inner ear and cause a whole bunch of other conditions. So if you were to say have this bony knob right there, that paleontologists theorize helped with basically equalizing this outside aquatic pressure on their inner ear and allowed them to submerge and stay submerged better. Now, all these similarities and differences led paleontologists to think that Indohyus is actually a cousin of early whales, not, say, a sister or a mother or a father, but a cousin. Now, their ancestral species each split apart about an additional 5 million years before it itself even evolved. What that species is, we have yet to find out. But here are some related species itself. So, Indohyus on the bottom, and you can see here how some of these skulls progress. Just right there, as the shape changes over time, you have Pakicetus, Myocetus, Dorodon, all of which we'll look into shortly, and then finally you look into a sample one of the modern whale itself. Now, 1/10,000th the size of one of those modern whales, namely the blue whale, is Pakicetus. Its name means whale from Pakistan. From the same period as Indohyus, Pakicetus was the size of a wolf, at about maybe 3 to over 6 foot long, depending on the specimen, and it possessed an even longer and more kind of like sort of elongated shaped snout. I mean, if you look at that right there, that actually is pretty much really starting to resemble like traditional today's. Granted, this is an illustration, but still, it's really starting to resemble the classical shape of a whale's skull, how things are starting to get elongated out with the placement of its eyes further back on the top of its head. It also, too, had webbed toes. Now, its teeth indicate a predatory existence along the coast and in shallow waters. And however, though, unlike Indohyus, it is theorized to be an ancestral whale. As of now, as of this second, because heaven knows that people argue a lot about this stuff and it could change any moment. As of now, Pakicetus is pretty much established as the earliest whale ancestor we have proof of. Now, here is another famous species, Ambulocetus for short. Its full name is Ambulocetus nadans, as you can tell. It's from about 48 to 47 million years ago in India and Pakistan. Its name means walking. Some sources will tell you swimming whale, but really it's walking whale. Now, which it could do up to a point. It was a decent, if not the most efficient swimmer with paddle feet and shorter legs. Now, they lived in freshwater lands like deltas. We know that because of the contents of their basically the contents of their stomachs, the sort of things that they ate, and just knowing that these creatures lived in, well, a delta. And here you can see the skeleton pretty much up close and just the shape of the head, and just really, again, how these things are starting to get more and more elongate and more classically the shape of a traditional whale skull. Now, Myocetus, or mother whale, lived about 46 to 47 million years ago, also in Pakistan. The species gained its name from a famous specimen that literally showed the creature giving birth. It was in the act of being in labor. Now, the infant was arriving head first. That's important because whale calves are born tail first. That way, in case something goes wrong, they don't drown. Now, not to sound grim, but that's why it happens. Now, so being land dwelling, you obviously wouldn't need that. So that's probably why these calves that they had arrived head first. Now, here is Rhodocetus, which is known for having its nostrils halfway up its head. So by now, the progression is gone pretty far along. Now, this creature was 7 to 10 foot long and, again, from Pakistan, of about 47 to 46 million years ago. So we're gradually coming up in time with each successive species. And of course, there are other species in between, but really, let's just look at some of these more famous ones. Now, this particular genus consists of two separate species just in of itself. And here is another relatively famous early whale, Protocetus. It's pretty famous because it owns the title of being the first whale to have a tail fluke. And that's why it got its name. Protocetus means early whale. It's from Egypt or so, about 45 million years ago. While it had more established ears than its relatives, it still probably could not echolocate at this point. They just weren't really that established into things. Now, its skulls, particularly the nasal cavity, though, are a subject to active study. That's because paleontologists are very much into debate when whales basically gained and lost certain changes in their skull morphology, specifically in their sinus. And Protocetus has a very, very well defined skull with a lot of sinus features that are keys towards them determining when these certain things evolved in whales overall. Now, Dorodon, or speartooth, was around much longer than our prior species, from roughly 33 to 41 million years ago. So it was, on this planet for quite some time relatively compared to the others. Now, found in several countries actually, it's a member of the family Basilosauridae, most likely the first completely aquatic whales, and an important name to remember for another species that was its contemporary, this fellow right here, Basilosaurus. Now, they're a rather famous early whale at about 41 to 34 million years ago. Different in shape, more elongate. It was much more elongate, so much so that it was actually first thought to be a reptile, hence its name ending in the classic saurus like dinosaurs. Its size was relatively close to that of a sperm whale, so these things were not really pushovers. They had a fairly good size, with its diet based upon large fish and perhaps sharks. It did eat larger animals for, well, we know that it preyed upon larger species because we have a Dorodon skull that's been found with those Basilosaurus teeth marks in them. And they were quite powerful teeth at that, with a bite force of nearly 2 tons. Its size was also impressive, able to grow over 60 foot long, really. Now, this right here is an early baleen whale called Lanocetus. It's named after a fellow that was involved in its discovery. The hows, when, and why of whales going to evolving into baleen feeders is really debated. Now, this particular type species of this genus was actually in from Antarctica, of all places, and it was massive in size. about 36 foot long, with another species potentially even larger. Now, took 23 million years, though, when you do this math altogether, to go from whales with teeth to the evolution of ones that had baleen. So, really, 23 million years just for everything to get from kind of point A to point B and sort of solidify in the evolution, and we see the early whales of today. That's an eye blink. I mean, when you consider how long the dinosaurs were around, and then we have this whole entire group like whales evolves into these little cat-sized things to different groups of whales like baleen whales. That's really, really impressive. Now, today's whales are divided into these two groups, which are Odontocetes, or toothed whales, and Mysticetes, which are baleen whales. Now, their ultimate common ancestor is something that we have yet to find or really establish, but it probably lived about 34 million years ago and most likely lacked baleen and could not use echolocation. The baleen evolved over time, much like gigantism in whales, which is another rather hot topic. So our old friend there, Lanocetus, its size was a puzzler for scientists. Now, that showed that gigantism evolved in several species and also possibly for different reasons. Now, for many millions of years, whales were diverse, but not really too big. The theory behind this sparked evolution into these groups, and the resulting, well, a lot of these groups getting much larger was actually changes around the Ice Age. So, with currents shifting, these currents concentrated plankton and krill. And the idea to explore it is that these changes in food patterns allowed, say, further evolution in these animals, and then basically allowed these various species to really adapt. And then with these steady food sources around, it allowed the whales to grow larger, and following them around the planet is what is, again, perhaps the origins of their famous treks around the oceans today. Now, why did whales move into the ocean ultimately? We really will have no definitive answer for that. Whether it be fewer predators in the sea, or food availability, or some sort of climactic thing, we can't really ever tell at this point. The only other mammals that we know of that went from the land to the water are manatees and dugongs. Now, both herbivores, unlike whales, who actually, something different, carnivores. Now, the amazing thing again is that this entire transition from the land back to the sea of this remarkable group of animals took only really 20 million years of evolution, and that's something that's really, really, I think, impressive. So, thank you very much, everybody, for joining us today, and I hope you have a lovely rest of your week. Bye now.